3, 2, 1. Da 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 da. Hi, Euclidean Vision here. Welcome to part 3.3 of How to Fix the Overwatch Lore. Today focusing on, again, the Overwatch organization particularly, and the sort of ideological conflicts it has to engage in order to figure out how it can do what it wants to or even needs to do in order to help the world going forward. What are the things like standing in its way? What are the viewpoints of each of the characters that may influence the overall outlook of the organization? And how do each of these impact each other sort of back and forth? So, starting off with the most pressing issue, the Petrus Act is the most immediate, like all-encompassing obstacle, really, that Overwatch has to deal with at this point. It's literally beyond their control. There's nothing they can actually do about it themselves. Could there be characters in World that could maybe start to do something about it in Overwatch's name instead? Yes, that is very possible. How fruitious that'll be is yet to be determined as well. But does that stop Overwatch doing anything? No. Tracer's got a voice line, I think, with Brigitte discussing this, that sometimes you gotta just do things. Like, you gotta go against what everyone says to sometimes do the right thing. Which, yeah, pretty fair. Like, that's a very viable viewpoint to have at this point. And that sort of raises one of the, what I think is going to be one of the most fundamental schisms within the initial recall Overwatch is people's stances on secrecy versus publicity. How do they achieve either of these? Which one is ideologically best to allow them to do what they want to do? That's a really hard question. There are obviously degrees in between. They could obviously go and act publicly without being lawfully accepted. They could obviously act secretively and secretively employ ways to make what they've done lawful or okay, or I mean, they could just go under another name, but I don't think they'll do that for, again, ideological sort of reasons that, like, no, we want to stay as Overwatch because that means something. We're not just going to be another random named group of people sorting stuff out so that we avoid the law. No, we're Overwatch, motherfuckers. How secretive and public that they end up being will obviously determine the degree of public reaction and attitude that they get. You know, if they're seen to be acting unlawfully but doing the right thing, there'll still be people with calls of vigilantism and things like that. So it's a very tender balance to figure out which side of the fence they should fall on, and it depends on how they go about it. Will they be able to achieve some of these goals? Can you stop Talon publicly, or do you have to do it secretively? Can you combat the Omnic crisis secretly, or do you need to do it publicly so that people become more aware of what's going on? And that argument you can apply it to any of the, say, sort of the aforementioned locations and sort of complications that we've got in the world at the moment. How do you deal with someone like Sanjay Korpal, who has heavily rooted themselves in the upper echelons of a mega corporation and is evidently a pretty smart little Pariston motherfucker? Yeah, there's some Hunter references for you Hunter nerds out there. How do you do that? Can you do that publicly? Again, as with Antonio Banderas, I forget his name, I really don't care, I don't see why anyone wants him to return, he's dead. It's in the same sort of vein as him. How do you remove someone corrupt from a position of power without it having dire consequences? I think this is a really important argument for Overwatch to have with itself about how it does what it does going forward. And despite all this, what if Recall has gone public? What if someone like Sombra has... I would be really surprised if she hadn't managed to do this. Someone like Sombra, why hasn't she gotten hold of the Recall video and has just sent it out to every news outlet in the world that's now going, oh my god, Overwatch wants to come back, shut him down, we know where he is, we know where the gorilla is, shut him down. But it could also provoke a reaction from the public of holy shit, the gorilla's fucking right, man, yeah, let's do this. So, has Recall been made public? As far as we're aware, I don't think so. It was broadcast on the Overwatch Emergency Channel, as far as May said. With someone like May, who has obviously been on TV since her awakening from cryostasis. She's been on TV since having woken back up, so has she been speaking publicly about like what Overwatch should be doing in response to the world's problems, etc.? Or has she even told people about the recall initiative? Who knows? Like, all of these things are possible, and if it is the case, it can work for and against them in equal measure. As I sort of said, as like a call to action, or even like a way to recruit more members, versus people knowing that they're doing what they're doing and trying to stop it. But that's not the only fundamental argument that the modern Overwatch has to have with itself before it can even start thinking about what it wants to do. Well, what is its stance on Omnics? And this is obviously very heavily focused in people's personal attitudes and motivations, because there's some characters who we know who are going to be not happy with the idea of an Omnic in their midst, and will be very determined to act primarily against the Omnic force, even if it's not the most pressing concern, because of their attitudes towards Omnics. If we see an Omnic turn up to join Overwatch, like Bastion, who I think is the most likely initial candidate, Zenyatta or Orisa, or even like Link 17, for example, oh, that'd be great, please do that. How are the other members going to treat that person, that Omnic person? Yeah, like, I believe Omnics are as equally sentient as the rest of us. They might not like the term person. Who knows? I haven't met an Omnic to know. The division between the characters within the new iteration of Overwatch will hugely determine their stance on Omnics. And I believe that the stance between the members of the group is quite split, but also quite balanced. There's plenty of people who are very strongly anti-Omnic. There's plenty of people who are very strongly pro-Omnic, and there's a few people who lie in between. And there's some who I think we don't really have a genuine clue on. So there's plenty of room for character conflict and growth on both sides of the spectrum from this argument, sort of learning to accept other beings versus learning to like accept the reality and like the nature of some actions and stuff. So there's a lot that this dynamic has to bring to what new Overwatch is, and it will strongly affect its ultimate goal going forward. Characters' views on Omnics obviously doesn't have to connect directly back to the second Omnic crisis or even the first one, but it obviously will and can in certain instances, but it will obviously stem much further than that. Which leads me to a further discussion on individual stances on a matter. I showed a friend of mine the Overwatch cinematics recently, and in watching the original, like the OG cinematic, the one set in the museum, at this point, my friend turned to me and was just like, why didn't Tracer just shoot her in the head? Why? And at first I was like, oh yeah, why didn't she just do that? But then it recently got me thinking that Tracer likely knows who Widowmaker is, that she's Amelie Lacroix. As Anna was able to realise that immediately despite the blue skin, and having thought that she was dead. It makes total sense that Tracer has also maybe figured out who Widowmaker is, having been in Overwatch at a time when she would have still been Amelie Lacroix. So Tracer might actually not want to shoot her, which would maybe explain a bunch of why Tracer never seems to hit anything in the cinematics whatsoever. Which is, a cool little character interaction in its own right, that despite these people being on opposite sides, one of them is trying to deter them from doing what they're trying to do without killing them, which is totally an option theoretically for Tracer to do. Like she could theoretically kill Widowmaker, but as a character, as Lena Oxton, she doesn't want to kill Amelie Lacroix, someone that she at least theoretically knew at a point and understands the situation of, in order to be like, oh man, you've had your mind wiped and stuff, I'm not going to kill you. That's like, I don't know, is that actually even more fair? Maybe it is. That's a discussion for her to have, I suppose. But that brings up the entire discussion on people's stance on killing. McCree sort of presented this as like a big ideological conflict at the beginning of Retribution, where Reaper did what is theoretically it is at least a logical action to take to resolve the situation in killing Antonio Bartolotti. McCree, in seeing that, felt that something was like morally wrong with what had happened, and that is a conflict that we're actually going to see like, we should see, like, hugely present in this iteration of Overwatch, because they, you know, these people are equipped to kill people. They're very equipped to kill people. If you've played the game, you know how equipped to kill people some of these people are. But how many of them are actually going to be willing to do that, and to who/what particularly? Reinhardt has fought tons of Omnics in the past, as has Zarya. They've both killed tons of Omnics. And as we see with Zarya, she's started to question what that has meant to her, and sort of the outlook that gives her on the world. Someone like Reinhardt is still seemingly very staunchly like anti-Omnic from his experiences, but has killed plenty of people and will be willing to, maybe not people, but has killed plenty of Omnics and is probably very willing to do so again. Whereas someone like Brigitte, his squire, has she ever killed anything? Has she ever fought an Omnic, let alone had to fight and kill a person? Is she even capable of that? I mean, in game, yes, I know, the meme that, yes, Brigitte is probably going to kill you, but Brigitte, the character, is she likely to be comfortable with doing that, having probably never gone anywhere near doing such a thing before? Doubtful. Someone like Winston as an animal, how does he feel about this? How do the Omnics feel about killing? How does someone like McCree feel about having to mortally wound and or kill someone that he used to care for, i.e. Reaper? And hey, will McCree get put in the exact same situation that Reaper was and have to make a decision to kill or not kill an otherwise unremovable being from a position of power? And this is like higher stakes theoretically with Reaper. If I'm right about what Reaper is, if I'm right about what Reaper's doing, getting McCree to kill him, that's a huge thing all on its own. But it stems from McCree's or anyone's view on killing. As with, one of the most important and sort of like poignant pieces about the Batman mythos, I mean, when it consistently occurs, is that he aims to not kill anyone, and it helps to a degree of making what you're doing morally just, by comparison to, say, the kind of things that Talon do, which they really don't care much about their means. They just care about the end result and how morally justifiable that is at the end of the days. Again, it's questionable. So this is an important thing that I think, again, Overwatch is going to have to discuss with itself, how each of its members feel about the act of killing and whether they feel that it's right to use such force to institute the kind of things that they have to do. Some people will be for it. Like someone like Reinhardt is probably going to be like, you stick an Omnic in front of me, I'm gonna smash it with my hammer. You're going to see a big slam. But then there are other characters, someone like Tracer, who's going to be there like, well, yeah, I don't want to kill anyone. I don't want to kill Omnics. I don't want to kill people. I don't want to have to hurt anybody. I know that we have to an extent. We're fighting another bunch of bullshit superheroes from the future. It's okay if I hurt someone at this point. Like, that's been noted throughout most of the media in the series, that, yeah, you can hurt most of these dudes and ladies and they'll be okay. So it is still a moral question despite that. Like, if you have, say, an immortal person, someone like Reaper or maybe Mercy, how do you feel about taking someone's immortality away and allowing them to die, or making sure that they die? Or, like, is that... There's tons of questions that plenty of people will have about, like, is that fair? Is that right? Is that okay? Is this a morally, like, justifiable means to use? And yeah, I think Overwatch is at least aiming to present some kind of nuanced, balanced view as to how the whole superhero thing works. They could afford to push the boat out where they push the boat out a bit more and run with the more crazy ideas that they've got at times, instead of just averaging everything out. But there's definitely a discussion to be made here, especially for the members of Overwatch, and it creates further conflict, like, between the characters within the organization, if there's such, like, a hugely pressing moral issue, if we all that they all can't agree on. That again can hugely inform how Overwatch does what it does going forward, who does what and why. So yeah, I feel like that's like a again, a further really interesting discussion for Overwatch to have. Which brings us to sort of more, again, like an even more nebulous subject, the like conflicting individual goals and how that will affect what Overwatch is. As I've discussed, we've got the arguments of secrecy versus publicity and the stance on Omnics for all of the characters to become involved with Overwatch now to have to resolve if they want to be able to do anything determinately. And that's some very basic ideological stuff. There's characters with very particular relationships to each other, and to external characters, like especially like we've got Brugitte's relationships to Reinhardt and Torbjorn, who she wants to look after Reinhardt and she wants to say maybe like live up to Torbjorn or possibly redeem him for what he feels are his actions during the Omnic crisis, yada yada. We've also got Farah and Anna, who most likely have an incredibly strained relationship to deal with, possibly using Overwatch as like a means to facilitate that, or it being something that interferes with that going on. So there's far more going into what these people feel they have to do than just, the logic of what we have to do is this. There's going to be plenty more going into than just that. There's also like the determined targets, like some people will want to focus more on the crisis, some people want to focus more on Talon, and some people want to focus more on some of the more nebulous stuff, or will have better clues into looking into that could lead us up to Talon eventually. It depends on how knowable and understandable a threat that Talon is and what they want to do about it. That will determine what is done about it. So we've obviously got that divide there of where people's motivations and emotions are going to affect which problems we deal with first, and that could often be out of sync with what is logically sensible, but it will provide much better character dynamic and growth for the people involved, and it can allow conflict to emerge. So here we come to the meat and bones of why this is important. The importance to the story. Like, this happening, like Recall and Overwatch coming back together and deciding what it wants to do and what it is and what it's fighting against, it's so important to the story that I'm still surprised we haven't really built on it yet. It enables conflict between our factions and sides, not just Overwatch and Talon, but pro-Omnic, anti-Omnic. People like the Junkers, who are obviously anti-Omnic, but they also have their own sort of socio-political, like geographical limitations and opinions. Like, they're an isolated society within their homeland. We've got the Mecha Corporation, who seemingly don't want any assistance from anyone else. They're dealing with stuff themselves. Then we've got conflict between the characters within and outside Overwatch. Like, character conflict is, again, one of the more interesting avenues to tell stories through. So seeing how characters within Overwatch conflict with each other when they're supposed to be this grand unifying unit is going to be super interesting to see how they all develop from there. And we've also got their relationship, as I mentioned, to characters outside of Overwatch, like Reyes and McCree. McCree has basically lost his father figure and lost sort of faith in what he was as well, and he possibly wants to resolve that personal, like, emotional connection that he has with that guy. Which, what does that have to do with Talon and the Omnic crisis? Nothing. But Overwatch existing facilitates the means for McCree, both in world and in story, to do such a thing. As I've sort of presented as well, it facilitates the interference between the like personal goals with that of the organisation. It also allows us to sort of categorize to an extent our characters and what side of the overall conflict that they fall upon, which, helps present their ideology. It's not just to be like sides or good and bad. It's meant to help us understand their ideological outlook on the world and the situation. So having a bunch of people in Overwatch means we can go, right, these people here believe these things as a unified group, but as individuals, they all have different variants on that thesis. And some of them might not even believe in the thesis ultimately, but they do act in its favour, or, there's plenty of complications to see there that can make for interesting characters. I'm glad that we have a bunch of shorts that are about individual characters. That's nice. When Overwatch's characters get to shine is when they interact with each other. Overwatch being back together gives us a chance for our characters to interact with each other beyond 2 lines of dialogue. to actually interact as understandable, viable, like, living creations, so that we can actually get a feel for who they are. It's in seeing their reactions to each other that we will learn more strongly who each of them are as individuals. And this is something that has just been missed out on so heavily. Like, there's been elements, like, very rarely have we had any huge character development from anything beyond two people fighting or two people discussing anything. Let's have 10 people discuss the situation and see what all the different attitudes are towards the situation and towards each other within and externally of that. Like, there's so much more to be made out of what is here, and it's just not being done. Never mind, just to say the obvious stuff, that like several plot threads already stem out of Overwatch as it is, as well as all the stuff I've said. Like, it's such an integral idea. Like, the structure and framework of the overall story will benefit from having its titular organization an actual thing in world. It's called Overwatch. Overwatch coming back is more important to the story than at least Blizzard seemed to know. And they're the ones who initially said that it was basically the most important thing that needed to happen. I get why either this is just all advertising, or it's not meant to progress at any reasonable rate, because otherwise they run out of story, or otherwise people become disillusioned with characters, especially if people get put on sides. They don't want to see their favourite characters put on. They don't want to ruin people's headcanons. There's a gazillion and one reasons why, I guess. Yeah, fine, they haven't moved forward to the most basic ground level point that they should be coming to tell this forward moving story, if they want to tell it. But hopefully, eventually, they'll realise it, because any of the community that likes the lore, I'm aware if you just like the game, you don't have to give a shit about the lore. Don't, it's fine. For those who like enjoy the franchise in some respect because of the lore, or just like the lore for what it is, like, I could happily never play Overwatch again, and if they were releasing an Overwatch comic every week, I'd still fucking read it. There's so much to be brought out of what there is here, and it just seems to be being wasted. I would like to see more voices in the community, because the community seems to be voicing this idea that, yeah, why aren't we moving the story forward? If more of us can at least address this concern, maybe we will eventually get stuff moving forward. Maybe. But, I mean, I'm not holding out a lot of hope. So, now, thankfully, that we've like covered the most general aspects of Overwatch as an organisation and its importance to the plot, etc., which hopefully we don't have to discuss any further. Let's discuss the characters. The characters, yes, finally, we get to discuss the characters I feel have the highest likelihood of joining, based on the evidence we have available to us at this time. So, I've been Euclidean Vision. This video continues right here, where I'm leaving off, and I'll just discuss the characters, like I promised. If you want to subscribe to the channel, it'd probably really help me out. And always remember, boop.